Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and today we are tackling the cook that many of you tell me that you lose more sleep on than any other cook, and that is the overnight brisket. So the overnight brisket can be daunting for many reasons. Namely, we're gonna take over a $100 piece of meat, throw it on the grill around midnight, and then go to bed. Gone are all the little interventions that we normally have available to us. If the temperature's starting to run away or drop down, we want to add smoking wood chips, or if the bark is starting to dry out, we want to spray it. These are all out the window when we are fast asleep. And so we really need to take a different sort of game plan here. Sounds great, right? Well, why on earth would you want to do this? Well, not every brisket we serve around dinner time. So we could start early in the morning and have it ready to go with a nice rest for dinner time. This brisket that's nearly ready to come off, it's due for 1 p.m. this afternoon. It's just shortly after 10 local time. And so what I want to do is take you through my complete process and everything that I change when the need arises for an overnight brisket that we want to serve in and around lunch any given time. Let's get into it. So I mentioned this brisket is nearly ready to come off. So let me give you just a quick peek so you know what's in store for later today when after we rest this and are able to slice into it for our taste test. To me, it's looking right on the money. So like all cooks, what you really want to do is have a game plan. And so the game plan is just going to be what we want to happen and when we want to happen. And since I mentioned I want this brisket to be ready for 1 o'clock for lunch, I want to add in a buffer in terms of my rest time. And so for brisket, I want a minimum of a 2-hour rest, which means I want this brisket done no later than 11 o'clock in the morning so that I'm able to get that 2-hour rest. So if we start working back from there, that's where we need to make some adjustments to our game plan. If I was to do like my brisket 101 video or that party cook where I did a brisket, pulled pork, and chicken, those were all done slightly hotter and faster using my double indirect method. But it is amazing how quick this knocks out a 20-pound brisket. And so I'd be ready to go into the foil boat normally in about 4 to 5 hours. And so if I'm planning to put this on at midnight, that means I need to move to the boat around 4 or 5 in the morning, and I don't want to do that. So the first adjustment we're going to make for our overnight brisket is to our temperature. So instead of running 300 degrees, I'm going to bring that down to about 250 to 270 degrees. So I'm going to try to extend my overnight cook time to about when I normally wake up, which is between 6 and 6:30. That'll give me an opportunity to move the brisket into the foil boat when I want to head off to my gym class, and I won't again be able to supervise or make any adjustments to the brisket for an hour. So that's the first adjustment we're going to make is our temperature. So going a little bit lower, a little bit slower. The other adjustment that we need to make to our game plan is, since we won't be here to supervise, is making sure that we absolutely get our vents right. So I'll walk through how to get a nice, really stable fire, and all the other things that we would do throughout the cook, like spraying, we won't be able to do, and adding smoke wood. So I'm going to share some tips and tricks that allow us to keep the smoke rolling when we're fast asleep, as well as keeping everything moist and prevent that from drying out. But before we do that, I want to share, this is a different rub than I've shared before. We got a little bit of coffee and some extra ingredients in there. So let me take you back to yesterday when we prepped this brisket. So I'll walk you through my trimming and the updated seasoning that's on that brisket. And when that's all done, it'll be ready for you to rejoin me when we're getting ready to rest this brisket for about 2 hours. So I promised to get you back to tonight's overnight brisket cook in just a minute, but first I'd like to take a moment to thank Trade for sponsoring today's video. So first, let me say, you could not pick a better sponsor for today's video, an overnight brisket, than with Trade Coffee, since after an all-night cook, we're definitely going to want a little coffee to keep us going. So when I took the coffee quiz at Drink Trade, I actually had a secret agenda. Not only was I looking to help discover a new, bold aroma coffee that I'll love in the morning, and you often see me in those early morning cooks accompanied by a nice hot fresh cup of coffee. That's especially true on these overnight cooks. but I was actually looking to help find something to add to my rubs, which is what led me to this one from Good Citizen out of Nashville, Tennessee. And that's because when you're adding something like coffee into your brisket rub, you really want to accentuate whatever it is you're cooking. So this is what I'm drinking right now. So not only is it a great coffee, but as you'll see later on, it's a star of a show in our rub because it has a couple notes that are really interesting with beef, which is chocolate and molasses. And so more to come on seeing Good Citizen in action later on in today's video when you see the end results of how coffee can also serve a dual purpose here by adding a tablespoon into some of the rubs that you make at home. I also have 3 great reasons for you to check out Trade, and if that doesn't seal the deal, there's an amazing offer, so make sure you catch the link at the end, as well as I'll link to that in the call out box in the description down below. So 3 things that I love about Trade. So first is really helping make small businesses accessible. I love supporting small business where I can, and Trade goes through a great effort to bring from coast to coast the nation's top craft roasters and serve them up in a marketplace that's easy to navigate and help find what you like. Speaking of finding what you like, the coffee quiz is not some algorithm, it's a human-powered algorithm. So there's thousands of coffees being tasted with notes that help make it easy when you go through that questionnaire of what do you like, what are you looking for in a coffee, what would you like to try, and serve up recommendations that are deeply personal to you. And you really can't explain any better the joy of getting something that's deeply personalized and connected to your individual tastes than the experience of going through that quiz and receiving something that's right on the money and guaranteed fresh. If you receive a bag and it's not 100% up to your satisfaction, what I love here is Trade's fresh guarantee, where if you receive a bag and it's not as fresh as you would like it, they will replace that bag for you absolutely free of charge. So I mentioned that offer that you'd want to stick around for. So right now, Trade is offering new subscribers $30 off their first order plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/SDBarbecue. That's more than 40 cups of coffee for free. So to get started, take their quiz at drinktrade.com/SDBBQ and let Trade help find you a coffee that you'll love. That's drinktrade.com/SDBBQ for $30 off your first order. Now, back to today's action. Okay, our 20-pound packer brisket is ready to go, and as you can tell by the assortment out here, we've got a number of supplies to get our overnight brisket ready. So first, I've just got some nitrile gloves to help keep clean, which I now have a save 10% code, by the way, I'll link down below, and free shipping if you get a case. I've got my Dalstrong fillet knife in order to trim this up. I've got a garbage bag you can't see off screen to dispose of our plastic, and some paper towel and a pan that we will rest this on overnight. I'll take a fast forward while we get this out and get ready to trim it up. Okay, so we are ready to start trimming. If you've seen my brisket 101 video, that's a great overview of how I like to trim. So the only thing I'll mention is what I look for different on an overnight brisket is the brisket itself. So I look for the absolute thickest flat I can find. So you can see the meat portion here is just over 2 inches thick and nearly that thick on the thinnest point. And the only reason I look for that, particularly for overnight, is when we're gonna put this on and then go to bed and not see it till the next day, we don't get a lot of opportunity to fix anything mid-cook that might be drying out. And so a thicker flat is going to help make that much easier. I'll take it fast forward while we get to work trimming off. I'm going to start with all this hard fat that's really tough, as well as some of the stringy fat and silver skin on the bottom, and then we'll flip it over and start to work on our presentation side, where I'm going to take the fat cap down to about a 1/4 inch. Okay, we're gonna make up our rub for our overnight brisket, and we're gonna do a couple things different than just a basic salt and pepper rub. So unlike my brisket 101 video, we're going to use a binder. Now on something small like a steak, I love truffle hot sauce as it adds that umami flavor, but you can find all sorts of things with truffle oil in them. And so I've got a slightly larger container that's gonna help give us some truffle infused
hot sauce as a bit of a binder, and I'm using a binder in an overnight brisket mostly for a few reasons. One, I don't have time to do an overnight dry brine. We're doing this, it's almost 6 p.m. and that'll be going on the grill closer to midnight. Normally if you had 24 hours, this gives time for the salt to penetrate and help the rub deeply adhere. Plus, I'm not going to be able to spray that brisket, and so that little extra moisture on the surface is just going to help in the absence of being able to spray. And I've got a couple extra things versus normal. We've got some smoked paprika, salt, pepper, Lowry's like normal, onion is going to be extra, some brown sugar, and some coffee. So we're going for sort of a high impact, bold flavor with a little bit of sweetness to it. So I'll take you fast forward. The only other thing that I will mention if you haven't seen it is at the bottom of the pepper cannon, this little cap to the line is 3 tablespoons. So that's what I'm going to use for my measurement. We're going to start with 3 tablespoons of black pepper. Then we're going to go for 2 tablespoons of our Diamond Crystal Kosher salt and the remaining Mount Lowry's. And then I'm just going to use a tablespoon measurement and add a couple of other ingredients. And the only other adjustment that I've made over the last few rubs is just going a little bit coarser on my pepper cannon. So I'm at about setting 24, which is going to give us a little bit more pepper flavor when it's done versus a fine mesh, which would be a little bit more difficult to detect. I'll take you fast forward while I grind this up and get ready to add our other ingredients. Let's check and see how we're doing. Ooh. That looks right about on the money. That's right to that fill line if you can see. So that's our 3 tablespoons. Let's get that in. Then we're going to go for about 2/3 Diamond Crystal and 1/3 Lowry's. Add in our salt. Going to go for a tablespoon of smoked paprika, a tablespoon of garlic, a tablespoon of onion, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, and a tablespoon of coffee. Mix that up really well, and our overnight brisket rub is ready. Let's get it on. Okay, so let's get our truffle-based binder on the bottom, and then we'll finish on the presentation side and add our rub, and then get this in the fridge for about 6 hours, which will give that salt a little bit of time to do some work, as well as the refrigerator time to dry out the surface a little bit for a great Maillard reaction. Don't need too much of this. Dab will do ya. All right, let's add our rub. Let's rub the presentation side. Okay, that looks good. Back in the fridge it goes.
Okay, let's talk changes to our fire building setup for the overnight set it and forget it brisket. We've got a very expensive piece of meat that we don't want to lose. And so there's kind of 2 scenarios that we really want to manage for. One is the runaway temperature. And what causes this is normally we rush. So if we wanted to put this on for midnight, have it cook until it's about 180 degrees Fahrenheit, try and get that to be around when I normally wake up 6:30 in the morning, is if we rush and put this on for midnight and we haven't fully built heat, meaning our slow roller or our deflector plates, or if you're doing a pizza stone as your other double indirect method, whatever you might be doing, is that hasn't fully absorbed our heat and energy. And so when we put on a nice cold brisket, it might look like our temperatures are stable, but really what's going to happen is it's going to take an hour or 2 for all of those things to soak up the heat to the point where they're properly heat soaked. And now all that fire energy that was being consumed by warming stuff up has nothing left to do but drive up our temperatures. And so this worst case scenario, and I've had it happen, is you wake up to a scorched earth brisket. So this is no good. The other scenario that we want to avoid happening here is, again, maybe we rush and we take a guess of where our vents need to be and we dial them down, and we maybe get a little bit too aggressive on our vent settings, and it might be able to hold for a while, but as some of that smoking wood kicks in and we get some smoke or other things like that, it potentially runs the risk of choking out our fire, and all of a sudden the temperatures plummet and you wake up to a brisket that is no longer food safe, as it's kind of come into that range and then started dropping and sat in a grill that is now cold to the touch for hours. Again, painful experience. I've learned both examples the hard way. Now, you can use an alarm system if you have something like the meter or any other temperature gauge that allow you to set a range to alert you with an audible alert if the temperatures run away too high or if they fall too low. or with the food if it goes beyond the temperature that you want, and your game plan was slightly off in terms of timing. So I definitely recommend using a tool like this. But I don't like waking to the sound of something at 3 or 4 in the morning, and I know this game plan works brilliantly for me and it will work for you, so that's what I'm going to share with you today. So a couple other things that we need to change in terms of how we build our fire. The first one is smoking wood. Now, I love using sort of a ratio of 90-95% charcoal to about 5 to 10% smoking wood. So normally 1 or 2 pieces is more than enough smoking wood, which will last about an hour. And then I can supplement that all day using the ash drawer hack and adding some smoking wood chips. Pardon me. But since we're going to be fast asleep, that's not going to work. And so I'm going to double up here. I still think I can maintain that 90-10 ratio with 2 extra pieces of smoking wood that I'm going to place north, east, southwest in the charcoal basket. I'm also going to place a piece of wood in the ash drawer instead of wood chips, because again, this will last much longer, and it's going to take a few hours at least for enough hot coals to start falling down for this piece of wood to even start smoking. So by the time it starts smoking, it'll be about the time that those 4 pieces of wood that we added have been fully consumed. So that solves how we're going to add smoke. The next thing that we need to solve for is spritzing. So normally you might want to spritz every hour or so in order to help prevent things from drying out, and just make sure that there's a nice moist surface early on for the first 4 to 6 hours for smoke to adhere to. Again, with us fast asleep, this becomes something that's impossible. So I've adapted a trick here I learned from Harry Sue, which is using 2 extra wood chunks to prop up our brisket. This is going to solve a couple problems for us. First, normally on the flat, you tend to get some pooling of fat as it renders out and it finds the low spot on your brisket and it just sits there. And this is going to prevent bark from developing. And so normally in the day, this is no problem. We could just lift our brisket and strain that fat off and make sure that we still have a surface for the smoke to adhere to and build a great bark. We can't do that when we are getting our beauty sleep. The other thing that we can't do is spritz. And so using this adapted wood technique, what I like to do is prop the brisket up with the thicker side of the flat and the thicker fat cap up high. And so this is going to give sort of a runoff area for fat as it renders to make sure that it doesn't pool. Plus, by putting the thicker end higher with the most amount of fat, that's going to keep a constant little supply, especially early on, of moisture and fat running down our brisket towards our drip pan, which is going to help make sure that nothing dries out and we wake up to a really crispy or dried out brisket. So the last thing we're going to cover is our vent settings. And so like always, I like to grab my Grill Blazer grill gun, start a nice hot fire in the center, and wait till I see those coals ashing over so we know we've got good, clean combustion, and that will help make sure that we don't run any risk of the fire going out. As the fire starts to come up to temperature and passes that ever so critical hand test, I'm not worried if I overshoot my temperature. So if I'm aiming for 250 to 270 degrees and I see 350 and the grill is still cold, this is no problem. Just let it go until you feel heat in the dome. Once you start to feel heat in the dome though, this is where we want to do a couple adjustments. So first I'm going to drop in the rest of my double indirect setup. I'm using the slow roller, then the X accessory rack, my heat deflectors, my smokeware drip pan, and then my cooking grids. But if you don't have a Series 3, you have something like this Series 1 or 2, you can easily recreate this putting your deflectors in the bottom position and then using the X accessory rack to prop up either some spare deflectors if you have those or your pizza stone. Either one will work just as well. And then you're able to do the double indirect the same way. So I'm going to let that now, a whole bunch of cold components, start to absorb temperature. And so what I like to do for this stage is move down to 1 finger on the bottom and then somewhere like the 3rd or 4th line on the control tower top. You could leave it wide open, but really what's going on when you started to install your slow roller, you have a full-blown inferno here, and I don't want to subject my slow roller, which has a maximum 500 degrees Fahrenheit, to a 600-700 degree fire that's just not reading on my temperature gauge. So by going to one finger and either the third or fourth line, the fourth line would be about 400 to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So I know that's a safe fire for the slow roller. It'll allow us still to build the temperature and not wait too long, but not risk doing any damage to our slow roller. As I see the temperatures start to recover, what you want to do is start slowing the momentum. If we don't do this, the temperature is just going to blast right past what we want, and that's where we run the risk of overcorrecting our adjustments and potentially letting our fire go out once we hit the sack for the night. If we throw on our food too quick and we haven't fully come up to temperature, that's when we run the risk of the runaway train on our temperatures. And so the best way to solve that is, as you start to approach your target temperature, start working towards your finish line. For 250 degrees to 270 degrees Fahrenheit, I plan to be about 1/8 of an inch inside the first line on the control tower top. If I was to go the same distance on the other side of that line, I'd be pushing that 270 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think will have this brisket done a little bit too early. So now that our vents and everything else that we need to adjust is all ready, I think it's about time to go take a peek at our brisket and get it ready for the rest, so it can hang out for about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours before we slice into it for around 1 o'clock. So we're still riding along right at 250. Looks good. Woo. So what we want to check now, I already know from the meter we are getting close to that temperature. So a brisket can be done anywhere from 195 degrees Fahrenheit to 211 degrees Fahrenheit. And the only way to really get a sense is to go for probe feel. And the best way I can describe that is if you had some room temperature butter is what that should feel like. So let's go ahead and check a couple spots. That's a great start. So that's reading 202 degrees, and I'm quite happy with the feel. That just feels exactly as it should. Let's check our flat. Oh, even better. Oh my goodness, that's going to be a good flat. So this feels perfect. So this is ready to come off. And before we wrap it to rest, if we were to wrap it right away, it will continue cooking and we'll potentially risk overcooking our brisket. This is perfect. So I'm going to get it off, let it rest outside for about 20-30 minutes, and then we'll put it away for its extended rest. So the wind is a little crazy already this early in the morning. So what we're going to do now that this has rested is remove the meter probe, transfer our brisket to some double wrapped aluminum foil. I'm going to pour some of the rendered out tallow that has been pushed out of the brisket in the boat, and then we'll wrap it up tight. I'll take you fast forward while we do that. Wrap it again in a towel. And this is ready to go in the cooler. All right, welcome to lunch and the payoff where all this work and effort of should I risk cooking a brisket overnight suddenly makes a ton of sense, because we're gonna dig into this for our taste test and an amazing lunch. So let me bring you nice and close. We can check it out together. All right, let me spin this around so you can see the jiggle here on this thing. But I could almost feel like I could pull the point right off of the flat. That's just got so much good stuff going on. But let's get a slice here. Oh, look at that. So juicy. Great looking smoke ring. Nice color. Okay, let's get a couple slices out of our flat here. Okay, so we've got flat, can hold up together. Place it right over the fingers though, and it's flopping and wanting to just tear apart. So I just give this the slightest pull and that's gonna fall apart. I think that is going to be awesome. Let me get a slice or two out of our point end. So I think it goes without saying, just looking at this, this is one
pretty looking brisket. That little bit of coffee just really amps up that bark flavor. Plus, I think all of our other tips and techniques coming together really have done a number on this bark. And I forgot to show earlier, I'll just put up a quick clip showing you what was left of that smoking wood piece in the bottom ash drawer when we took this off to rest. As you can tell, that is pretty much nearly entirely consumed. So I think it's done its job. But enough about that, let's get in. Got my eye on this piece, do a bite. Properly rendered fat cap like you want. Very, very juicy for the flat. And then all those other flavors, the garlic, salt, pepper, a little bit of Lowry's, just like normal, is coming together in a perfect harmony. And like what you always want, you don't really want any one flavor to dominate the flavor profile that you're getting. You want your tongue and your brain to be going, that's really good. I don't know what you did, but I want it again. And that's exactly what we have here. Let's try a little piece from our point end here. So as you can tell again, whew, just flops, still holds together, but the slightest pull, we're just coming right apart. Looks good. Let's go in. This is going to be a crazy lunch. Wow. So, like always, the point, still my favorite. Absolutely amazing. It is right on the money. But this flat is among one of my best. And I wasn't even awake for most of it. So that's the beauty of the overnight brisket. I hope you really enjoyed this video and some of the tips and tricks and the things that we change for doing an overnight cook to turn out a result like this for lunch, help you get a great night's rest and an even better barbecue to share with your friends and family the next day. That's it for today, though. I'm about to sign off, but before I go, make sure you check out the description down below for any of the products I mentioned, as well as some helpful playlists, as well as my members only section where I get a chance to go live in a bit more of a real live one-to-one setting versus these pre-recorded videos. That's it for today, though. I'm James from Soaking Dad Barbecue, signing off. Remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.